231. There are moments when the universe shows you mercy. Moments when the benevolent gods look down on you and say, hey, this poor bastard's been through enough. Let's throw him some good fortune now. This was not one of those moments. Because out of all the things that could have ambushed me in this oversized terrarium of a jungle, out of all the mandible-snapping, spore-belching, flesh-devouring abominations, the one I woke up to just had to be her. Lily. Freaking. Elderwing. I stared at her. She stared back. Somewhere, a tree creaked. Something chittered in the dark. A nearby vine coiled a little too deliberately. And I seriously considered throwing myself into the maws of the nearest carnivorous plant just to end this conversation before it even began. I croaked, trying to sit up, but pain made sure I regretted it and immediately punched me right back down. Arg. Lily looked torn between concern and mild panic. Don't try to move too much. I ignored her and circulated essence through my body. Almost instantly, the pain dulled and strength came trickling back into my veins. I took a deep breath and staggered upright. My legs felt a little shaky, like I'd been resting for days and my limbs had forgotten how to move. A breeze passed through the clearing. It smelled like wet moss and rotten rain that hadn't fallen yet. How long was I out? I asked, keeping an eye on my surroundings. She hesitated. Almost 2 days. What? I blinked. 2. She nodded. You were in really bad shape. Dislocated shoulder. 3 cracked ribs. Wrist punctured clean through. Internal bruising. Bleeding profusely. You're lucky I found you when I did. Lucky's one word for it, I snorted. Where the hell are we? The spirit realm, Lily answered oh so helpfully. I wanted to smack her. Where exactly in the spirit realm, genius? She pursed her lips and shook her head. Your guess is as good as mine. I was in the Night Castle after getting eliminated in the flag test when the spirit beasts started attacking out of nowhere. I helped with evacuations, saw a flash of white light, and suddenly woke up here. After aimlessly wandering around for hours, I found you half buried in a swamp a few clicks west. So I bandaged you up and carried you along. I didn't think you'd wake up anytime soon, honestly. If not for your enhanced endurance, you wouldn't have survived your injuries. Well, fuck, I resisted the urge to yank out my hair and scream curses at the heavens. Because my guess wasn't as good as hers. It was better. I knew exactly what was happening and where we had ended up. You see, in the game, Selene had teleported everyone out of the Night Sanctuary some minutes after the massacre began. She was supposed to teleport them all to my father's domain, the Golden Sanctuary. But just as she was in the middle of doing that, one of the unholy Soulwraith Titans attacked her. Selene flinched and messed up the teleportation process. As a result, a handful of core souls were yeeted off course. They crash-landed far from the Golden Sanctuary. And ended up right here in this nightmarish forest called the Noctvale Wilds, a jungle so hostile that even the trees in this region wanted you dead. So who were these unfortunate people? Mostly the main characters, plus a few insignificant extras. This arc was called Stranded in the Spirit Realm, and carried a grim tone much like the arc before it, Massacre during the Class Excursion. Every side character ill-fated enough to get caught in this arc met a gruesome end. Some even died in creatively sadistic ways right before the protagonist, just to show the severity of the situation and the lethal stakes at play. For the main heroes, however, this arc served as more of a narrative tool, a plot device to bring them closer together. It was during this time that the game introduced characters like Vince Cleverly and Ray Warner. And it was then that the heroes began to forge familiar bonds with each other. By this arc's end, they were no longer mere allies. They had become a found family. Even Juliana, a main heroine portrayed as deranged and cynical, began to tolerate the main cast. Which, in her language, was basically a love confession. According to some players, this event was the story's pivotal turning point. Because in plotlines where this arc was skipped, rushed, or botched, the heroes took much longer to grow closer and fell apart far more easily when tensions rose later in the game. Some of them even went rogue, depending on how badly this arc was handled. That's how important it was. So, what exactly was the problem? Well, beyond the fact that the Noctvale Wilds was a maze of horrors. I wasn't supposed to be here. Samael Kaiser Theosbane was not a part of this arc. To be clear, I wasn't just meant to be elsewhere. No, I was supposed to be dead by now. Yep, in the game, Samael triggered the massacre under Asmodeus' influence. By its end, he was killed, typically by Michael, occasionally by Alexia. And in the rare plotlines where he somehow managed to survive, Juliana always made sure he didn't. In short, I had no business being here. This was no place for a villain. This was a place for disposable side characters to die meaningless deaths and for the main heroes to trauma bond and call it character development. It was then that Lily's deeply worried voice finally broke my spiraling train of thought. Hey, Sam, she shrieked, reaching forward to grab my wrist. Stop it. And that's when I realized, I'd actually started yanking at my hair. Hard enough to make my scalp sting. I blinked, released my grip, and slapped her hand away. Get back, I snapped. She recoiled, eyes widening. What the hell? But before she could continue, I summoned my origin card. A river of glowing light particles flooded out from deep within my soul and condensed into a solid rectangular shape above my shoulder, its surface etched with luminous golden runes. At once, I willed the ground beneath me to rise. And the ground obeyed. With a tremor and a grinding rumble, the mossy earth under my feet surged upward into a column made of stone, dead roots, and dirt. Lily stumbled back with a startled yelp as the rapidly growing column carried me toward the shattered sky like an elevator. For several seconds, I kept rising higher and higher. Above the trees, above the canopy, into the open air. The wind tousled my hair. The scent of moss and rot faded, replaced by something thin and cold and clean. A few large insects buzzed nearby, but none dared to get too close. They were all infant spirit beasts. And they could instinctively sense that I was hopelessly stronger than them. Attacking me would only bring death. So they didn't. When the column lifted me to the highest vantage point my abilities' range would allow, it stopped rising. I squinted and looked around. To my left, I could barely make out the silhouette of a distant mountain range, jagged black peaks jutting from the earth like the spine of a long-dead massive god. That should be the crown of thorns, I murmured to myself. Beyond that is the night sanctuary. Which meant, I slowly turned a full 180. And my heart sank, because to the west, where my father's domain, the legendary Golden Sanctuary, should have been, I saw nothing. Nothing but an endless stretch of jungle. Nothing but towering trees and plants as tall as skyscrapers, all painted in a sickly shade of greenish-black hue under the ominous crimson light of the bleeding moon. Then I glanced down. It turned out we were perched on what seemed like the highest step of a massive, multi-tiered plateau, like a stairway carved for giants. Traveling west from here meant we'd have to cross several miles of jungle, climb down a steep ridge, cross several more miles, then climb down again. Over and over. After repeating that process 5 or 6 times, we'd reach the deepest part of the forest. And that, in itself, would be a challenge. Because each plateau below was more overgrown than the last. The farther down we went, the thicker, and deadlier, the forest would become. And the wildlife only grew more monstrous. Far below, I spotted a beetle the size of a horse, gnawing on something disturbingly humanoid. To the southwest, a swarm of wasps clustered around a colossal tree. Even from this distance, each of those wasps looked as big as my fist, which meant they'd be enormous up close. Something howled in the distance. Something else hissed back. I could practically feel the predatory intent oozing off this place. This wasn't a jungle, this was a decaying graveyard. And the fact that I couldn't see even a faint shimmer of the Golden Sanctuary or the Lake of Grief anywhere on the western horizon, meant we were far, far away from safety. From near the foot of the column, Lily shouted up at me. What do you see? I didn't answer. I simply rubbed my face and let out a quiet sob. Because, on top of everything else, I was stuck here with the one person I least wanted to be around. This whole ordeal wasn't just going to be physical torture, it was going to be mental as well. 232. An hour passed. The sky above us remained cracked, like a shattered mirror suspended over the world. The crimson moon kept bleeding quietly in the distance, spilling light like a wound that refused to clot. The surrounding forest didn't get any nicer either. We were moving deeper into the woods now. And the further we walked, the more claustrophobic the overgrowth became. It was all just a suffocating tangle of vines, towering trees, and massive ferns. The air was so thick with moisture and spores that every breath I took felt like sipping rot. Moreover, the ancient trees looming above us didn't look like anything natural. They looked like something older, something eldritch and titanic. Their bark was lined with deep scars and phosphorescent fungi that glowed faintly under the red light of the moon, like veins beneath diseased skin. And as for my company, well, let's just say I was less than thrilled. Lily was walking behind me, mostly in silence, though every now and then, she'd pipe up with something irritating. Like a comment about the terrain. A thought about survival strategies. The occasional soft, "Where are we going?" And, "Are you hurting anywhere?" I didn't answer her. Not even once. I hissed, I growled. I kept walking. I kept walking like a moody cat that hadn't forgiven its owner for buying the wrong brand of kibble years ago. Sourced directly from MV6LEMP6YR. Only in this case, the owner was my ex-girlfriend who had kissed someone else while we were still technically together. Okay, that analogy made no sense. But you get my point. Over the last few months, after gaining my past life's memories, after realizing Lily was the main heroine in a game that had somehow become my new reality, I had told myself I wouldn't feel anything for her. I had told myself I'd treat her like any other useful character. A tool, a pawn, a powerful piece on the board to be maneuvered, exploited, and discarded if needed. And I could have done that. I could have done that easily. You see, from a very young age, I had this personality trait. A quirk, you can call it. I could turn off my emotions like flipping a switch. And no, I'm not being poetic or figurative. I mean I could literally shut it all off. Fear, guilt, affection, sadness, love. All of it. I could make it all go away in a moment's notice. It's like yanking the power cord from an old machine. And the second I yank it, everything stops. Everything goes silent. And all that's left is cold, mechanical logic that only cares about results. That's how I let thousands of people die in Ishtara. I dismissed the crippling guilt and hesitation I would have usually felt. That's how I fight without fear. I kill it. Even during the massacre, when hundreds of cadets froze up in paralyzing terror, I stayed calm because I shrugged the dread off like it was something to be shrugged off. I don't know what it is. A trauma response. A built-in coping mechanism. A curse, or maybe a blessing. I don't know. The first time I consciously used it was when I activated the bloodworm on Juliana. I watched her scream and beg and convulse at the floor before me, blood leaking from her nose and tears streaking down her face. While I felt absolutely nothing. I didn't flinch. I didn't hesitate. I just stood there, cold and quiet, looking down at her as if watching someone else's nightmare unfold in front of me. I felt like trash afterward. But not in that moment. And I could have done the same for Lily. I could have stopped feeling anything for her. I could have flipped the switch and used her like the asset she was. I could have pretended to accept her apology instead of making things complicated. But I didn't, because even after everything, even after I swore I didn't want to deal with her, even after I promised myself I didn't care about what happened, a small, stupid, vindictive, petty part of me still resented her. And it resented her so much to stop caring. So yeah, I wasn't exactly in the mood for a conversation. We kept walking in silence, occasionally broken by her one-sided chirping. The jungle creaked around us. Some distant insect let out a wet screech. The ground pulsed faintly underfoot, as though we were walking on the back of something that hadn't fully decided if it was alive or not. I continued to trudge forward even as Lily's voice broke through the quiet hush for the nth time. "So are you finally going to tell me where we are going?" she asked in her usual tone as we reached a small clearing. "You'll have to tell me sooner or later, you know." And for the nth time, I ignored her. "Intel. All right, that's it." Lily took a deep breath and called out sharply. "You're going to have to talk to me eventually." I simply kept walking. Even the bugs seemed to hesitate. Like they knew the conversation was about to escalate and didn't want to get caught in the crossfire. "We're stuck here, Sam," she continued, her voice sounding a little brittle. "God knows for how long. For all we know, the two of us are the only ones here. You can't just keep pretending I don't exist." I continued doing exactly that. I refused to acknowledge her presence, treating her like just another existential threat lurking in this jungle. And like all threats here, I had no intention of dealing with it, unless it gave me a reason to end it. Fortunately, she gave me that reason pretty soon. From behind me, Lily manifested a card, and a staff appeared in her hand. It was a long, white staff, a little jagged at the ends like it had been carved from the bone of some giant creature by hand. She then took 3 quick strides forward, spun around, and planted herself directly in front of me, barring my path like a very stubborn roadblock. I blinked at her, then blinked again, then let out the deepest, most guttural sigh I'd managed all day. My right eye twitched. "What do you think you are doing? You're going to fight me," she declared, her staff held high. I stared at her for a second before tilting my head very slowly. "What? You heard me," she nodded once. "You've always been good at fighting, Sam. That's what you do. That's all you do. When something bothers you, you fight it. When you can't solve something with words or logic or patience, you beat it into the ground until it stops existing." My jaw tightened. "You're violent and aggressive," You think you're complex, but really, you're just hiding the fact that you don't know how to talk about things. Lily. So fine. If talking my way doesn't work for you, she said, voice shaking now, not with fear, but with the kind of misguided frustration only friends can have for each other, then we'll talk your way. But you will talk. You won't bottle everything up anymore. I know I hurt you. I've tried to apologize for it, again and again. And I'll keep doing it until you finally hear me. Until you lash out, scream, curse, or even punch me. Wow. Just wow. The sheer audacity of this girl left me speechless. My eyes narrowed to slits. And in one fluid, infuriated motion, I grabbed her by the shoulder and shoved her aside. She stumbled a step but caught herself. I resumed walking without looking back, mumbling beneath my breath, insufferable slag. Okay, in hindsight, maybe I shouldn't have called her that. I went a bit too far. Because that's when she attacked me. There was no warning, no flare of killing intent. No shout, no preamble, just a faint shift in air pressure behind me. And the whistle of a staff cutting through wind. My instincts screamed at me. I immediately ducked low, eyes flashing wide in disbelief as her staff whooshed over the top of my skull, missing my hair by mere inches. Are you insane? I snapped, turning around, my hands already rising up in a defensive stance. You could have taken my fucking head off. Lily raised her staff higher. Her eyes were blazing now, not with anger, but with determination so raw and pure that it caught me completely off guard. We're doing this, she repeated. And that's when my patience finally broke. My fists clenched, my shoulders squared, my lips pulled into a tight smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. I cocked my head just enough to crack my neck, then let out a low scoff that echoed slightly in the thick air. Fine, I muttered. You want to talk with fists? Then I hope you brought a damn stretcher, because you're about to get conversation straight into the dirt. Chapter 233. So we are surrounded by spider monkeys, so what? Lily moved first. Because of course she did. She lunged forward with her staff, swinging it in a wide arc meant to keep me at a distance. Too bad for her, I'd already closed the gap. With a half step inward and a lazy pivot of my body, I caught the shaft of her staff with one hand and shattered it with the other. Effortlessly. Just to be clear, I didn't snap it. I didn't break it. I shattered it. With a single chop, I shattered her staff into splintered fragments that scattered through the air like shrapnel. She gasped. I stepped in, slammed a shoulder into hers, and knocked her back, almost sending her off balance. Her eyes widened, because now she remembered. There was a difference between knowledge and power. She knew how to fight. I was a fighter. She was trained. I was forged. And she may have been good. But I was better. However, Lily Elderwing wasn't done yet. She stepped back, regained her footing, and spread her arms as the broken fragments of her staff disintegrated into a shimmer of light sparks. Instantly, thin threads of silvery blue light streamed out from her body, stitching together into a glowing rectangular shape above her shoulder. Her origin card manifested. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I swore I felt the temperature dip. Her violet eyes flashed bright. And suddenly, she was gone. Well, not gone, but she moved so fluidly, it felt like she vanished. The next punch I threw missed entirely. And before I knew it, she was behind me, ducking under my guard and jabbing an elbow into my ribs. I grimaced, not as much from pain as from sheer irritation. I swung again. She twisted low beneath my arm and spun, sweeping my leg with a wide arc of her heel. I didn't fall but I did stumble. My eyes narrowed. This infuriating wench, she was reading me like an open book. I attacked high, she dipped low. I swept sideways, she pivoted right. I feinted, she countered. Every move I made was instantly anticipated. It was almost as if she was gazing at what hadn't even happened yet, and reacting before it did. Because that's exactly what she was doing. Her origin card let her see 5 seconds into the future. The outcome of every strike, the direction of every movement, the course of every blow, she saw it all. She flowed like water and struck like wind. Her attacks were a graceful blend of Muay Thai's aggression and Kung Fu's poise. Her footwork was light and quick, and she capitalized on even the tiniest openings in my defense by dealing swift elbow and knee strikes with surgical precision. At the same time, she evaded all my blows, either whirling around my reach or countering with forceful palm thrusts. And yet, I still pushed her back. Because just knowing what was coming didn't mean she could stop it. I fought like a beast in a cage, relentless and feral. Every swing I hurled carried enough weight to crater stone. Every punch I threw sent soft shockwaves in the air. I didn't try to outmaneuver her. I just overwhelmed her. My onslaught was brutal and violent and unrelenting. And Lily was barely keeping up. Because she knew that if even one of my attacks landed, she'd be down on the ground. She couldn't afford a single mistake. You weren't this good before. You were never this good. You always hated fighting, I snarled, my lips curling up into a smirk. Have you been sparring with your new boyfriend? How sweet. Unluckily for you, I'll not be nearly as gentle as him. I sidestepped a quick jab from Lily, who didn't rise to my bait, and reached inward, deep into the marrow of my soul, summoning my own origin card. Luminous golden particles exploded from my body, flaring like sparks from a forge. They spiraled into a radiant card that hovered above my right shoulder, its surface etched with blazing runes. In the next second, the earth beneath our feet shuddered, obeying the will I'd suddenly decided to impose on it. With a thunderous crack, the ground around Lily erupted. Massive hand-like constructs made of stone, soil, and tangled roots burst forth, each one the size of a carriage and twice her height. Their fingers snapped toward her like the wrathful fists of buried titans clawing their way out of the underworld. Lily gasped and hopped back a few steps, trying to get as far away from these hands as possible. The first hand missed, grabbing nothing but empty air. The second hand pounced from her flank. She vaulted over it with a breathtaking grace expected from someone who could see what wasn't. Yet, more hands lunged to seize her, but none managed to even land a touch. She darted across the clearing, ducking, spinning, flipping, rolling. Each dodge she made was perfect. Every step she took was precise. The giant earthen hands slammed down one after another, all failing to catch her by inches, as she kept slipping past them like a phantom. Watching her move like that felt like witnessing poetry in motion. But even the most beautiful of poems have to end. Because what if she could see the future? If I made the future inescapable, then what could she do about it? Nothing. Therefore, I did exactly that. All the hands I had conjured, all 8 of them, suddenly turned and converged in her direction at once. Lily might have realized how hopeless it was to keep resisting by this point, but she still didn't stop fighting. She leapt over the nearest incoming hand, then used it as a launchpad to jump even higher into the air. But even a seer couldn't dodge what came from every direction. One hand eventually caught her mid-leap, its stone fingers clamping around her calf. Then, it yanked her down. Lily screamed as it slammed her into the earth. Hard. Thwomp. Then it whipped her around and flung her sideways, smacking her into a tree trunk with a meaty crack that echoed like thunder through the forest. Her body bounced off the bark like a ragdoll. But before she even hit the ground again, I was already there. I strode forward and wrapped a hand around her throat, lifting her off her feet as the earthen hands around us crumbled back into dust and chunks of stone. Lily's back pressed against the tree. My grip tightened on her neck like a vice. She squirmed and tried to pry my hand away, but she wasn't nearly strong enough. In the end, her nails could only weakly scratch at my arm. And before she could retaliate any further, I started battering her face with my fists. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Each punch landed with bone-jarring force. Each blow was a message I didn't have the words to scream at her. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Her face went from flushed to bruised, to bloodied. Her skin split and swelled. Her eyes fluttered. Her breath hitched, turning wet and shallow, as she could only gasp between the hits. Thwack. After the 7th punch, I stopped. Fingers still clamped around her throat. Fist now painted red with her blood. Chest heaving like a war drum. Lily coughed, spraying even more blood down her chin. Then, she looked at me through one half-swollen eye before choking out a whisper in a cracked and breathless voice, "Faye, feeling better and now." And just like that, my rage came roaring back. I balled my fist, drew my arm back, ready to cave her face in, when she moved. With all the strength her battered body had left, Lily raised both legs and kicked me square in the chest. The hit wasn't clean, but it was enough. Caught off guard, I stumbled back, crashed to the ground in a messy roll, and came up on one knee. Gnashing my teeth, I snapped my head up, only to freeze in my tracks. Because right then, I saw something massive tore through the cover of forest from our left. Whatever it was huge. 8 feet tall, at least. Hulking, powerful, and inhumanly quick for its large size. All I spotted was a blur of 4 limbs and 8 twitching, segmented spear legs that each ended in a sharp spike. Obviously it was a spirit beast. And it plowed straight through the tree I'd held Lily against just a moment ago. Thwomp. The tree exploded into splinters and dust. I shielded my face, squinting through the cloud of debris. Then the dust settled, and I saw it. The thing that had attacked us. It was an abomination of nature. An insult to biology. An amalgamated nightmare. That thing had the broad, muscular body of a gorilla, but its spine was covered in glossy black chitin. 8 crimson eyes glowed scarlet like embers across its face, mandibles twitching below its jagged teeth. Enormous spider legs sprouted from its back, long, segmented, and sharp, spasming like living spears eager to impale us. Its fur was pitch black, but patchy and uneven, wet with some kind of fluid and dirt, clinging to its twitching body like fungus to rot. And pinned beneath one of its spear-like limbs, was Lily. My heart sank. Her body had gone limp. Blood and dirt smeared across her face. She wasn't moving, but she was still alive. That beast hadn't hurt her yet aside from colliding straight into her with the force of a speeding boulder. And then, just when I thought this situation couldn't get any worse, the situation got worse. The surrounding forest shook, shrieks erupted from the trees. And very soon, more monsters emerged. These ones were smaller than the spider gorilla, but no less vile. They resembled monkeys. Well, if monkeys had mossy green fur, 4 arms instead of 2, several glowing eyes, and barbed tails that could shoot spiderwebs. They scampered into the clearing with clawed limbs and spider-like motions. Some came swinging in from the trees on web-like slings, shrieking and drooling. And in the blink of an eye, we were surrounded. 234. I had no time to think. One moment, I was blinking dust out of my eyes and trying to make sense of the hellstorm stampede barreling straight toward me. The next, I was moving just as the first spider monkey lunged at me with a loud shriek. The sound it let out was so unsettling, like a shard of broken glass being dragged across an old blackboard, it burrowed into my skull and made me regret having ears. I immediately raised an arm, and the earth rose with it. A colossal hand of stone erupted from the ground and caught the charging creature mid-sprint. Then, with a single thought, I made the hand close into a fist. The beast shrieked again in panic and agony as it was being squashed, before its body cracked and caved in. Its limbs contorted unnaturally, its exoskeleton split like fruit under pressure. When the hand uncurled, it dropped the crushed carcass to the jungle floor with a dull, lifeless thud. But even before the corpse hit the dirt, another shriek rang out, then another, and another. More of its kind were coming from all directions now. One dropped from the canopy, hitting the forest floor in a twitching scuttle. Another bounded from the trees to my left. Then 4 more broke through the brush with inhuman speed, their limbs skittering and mouths foaming. In mere seconds, I was being rushed by over a dozen of these abominable spider-monkey hybrids. Neither of them were quite as large as the gorilla spider from before. But they were definitely faster and hungrier and crazier. So my response was instant. I conjured more hands. Yes, I was spamming one move. So what? One after another, titanic hand-like constructs of soil, stone, and dead roots erupted around me, each one rising like the grasp of ancient giants clawing their way out of hell. They tore through the clearing with seismic rage. Some of the creatures were caught midair and slammed into the ground with bone-splitting finality. Others were batted into trees. Their bodies snapped on impact like twigs hurled into stone. One beast was torn in 2, pulled apart by 2 opposing fists that crushed it from either side like a child ripping apart a toy. And still, they never stopped coming. More of them poured into the clearing, wave after wave, like a living tsunami of hungry, rabid animals. They weren't just running toward me. They were piling over each other, crawling through the corpses of their own kind, digging their claws into anything that moved, or didn't. They were driven not by reflexes or survival, but a primal kind of hunger that I feared would never end. It was a deeply wrong sight. And I was just taking it all in when one of the spider monkeys landed on the back of a stone hand I had summoned to crush it. Startled, I watched as it skittered up the stony surface and crawled toward me like an actual overgrown spider, like gravity didn't exist for it. Its mouth opened with a hiss, and I swear its face split into 4 petals that peeled back to reveal rows of needle-thin teeth. Then it leapt straight toward my head. I whipped the stone hand upward and smacked it midair like a gnat. Its body collided with a tree, bounced once, then flopped to the ground in a twitching spasm. But it wasn't dead. Unfortunately, I didn't have the luxury to worry just about it. Because 10 more spider monkeys came pouncing at me from practically all directions, from the branches, from the brush, from behind. One was even falling from the sky. Ag, fuck it. I cursed and discharged more essence into the ground under me. The ground rumbled in response, before sizable strips of soil and stone tore free, rising upward to form tall walls. These walls, these thick slabs of rock and tangled roots, then curved inward, pressing closer and grinding together. One after another, ginormous dome-shaped structures began closing and trapping dozens of spider monkeys who had either rushed in too fast or were too slow to move away in time. The walls snapped shut like bear traps, imprisoning the beasts inside. I heard their muffled screams. They shrieked and scraped at the inner walls with their claws in a desperate attempt to dig their way out. But they wouldn't make it in time. Just like that, I had caged dozens of those abominations for the time being. And it still wasn't enough. They just kept on coming. They didn't care that I was stronger, that I was faster, that I could kill them with a snap. They just didn't care, because there were always more of them. I gritted my teeth and decided to hop back a few steps, when splash! My left leg froze. I looked down and saw a thick sludge of webbing clung to my shin and the ground, anchoring me in place. I jerked my leg once, twice, but it was of no use. The webbing had hardened around my leg like cement. I was about to use more force, but another spider monkey crouched nearby fired one more glob of webbing from the barbed end of its tail. The sludge struck my right leg, anchoring that too. And just like that, I was the one trapped now. Both my legs were glued to the ground. And the horde was zeroing in. That was when I saw Lily. She still hadn't moved. From the looks of it, she couldn't. She had collapsed unconscious on the ground. The gorilla spider loomed above her, one segmented spear limb already raised high. I realized then, it wasn't just going to kill her. It was going to devour her. Now, I could very well have left Lily there. Hell, I was tempted to. But in the game, in one of the plotlines where Lily died during an event, Michael fell into a deep, gnawing depression. For the better part of the story after that, he was bitter and gloomy and completely useless. And I really didn't want to deal with that Michael. So I made a decision. Fighting was pointless. Winning was impossible. But surviving, that I could manage. I didn't waste time trying to free my legs. I simply willed the earth beneath me to move as a small army of spider monkeys continued advancing on me. The ground obeyed. It surged up beneath me like a rising tide. Dirt and stone parted under my will, forming into a mobile platform that started dragging me backward in a swift retreat. It felt like I was surfing across a cresting wave with bare feet. At the same time, I conjured another earthen hand, this one near Lily. It burst forth in a great upheaval of soil and dust, then snapped toward her limp body and scooped her up before the gorilla's spear limb could pierce through her chest. The monster roared, but its prey was already gone. The stone hand lifted Lily gently against its massive palm and raced toward me. Within seconds, it was gliding beside the earthen wave I was riding. Together, we rushed deeper into the woods. Behind us, the forest exploded into shrieks, chatters, and rustling chaos as the beasts began chasing us. I reached for Lily, only to duck a split second later as a four-armed monkey jumped at me from the trees somewhere on my right. But long before it could reach us, a stone lance sprouted from the ground beneath it and skewered the creature like meat on a spit. Every other spider monkey that dared approach us met the same fate, impaled on jagged spikes or blocked by sudden walls of stone. Then I reached again and grabbed Lily's limp body from the earthen hand. I didn't cradle her. There was no time. I slung her over my shoulder like a sack of grain and kept moving. Come to think of it, I muttered to myself, feeling the wind on my face, I seem to be carrying a lot of young maidens through battlefields lately. Lily groaned faintly. Behind us, the monsters were closing in. The wave of earth was carrying us forward, but it wasn't enough. I needed more speed, more space, or just maybe more chaos. Then, a genius idea struck me. You see, this forest was too thick, too lush. As a result, there was far too much oxygen in the atmosphere. And more oxygen meant, everything was that much more combustible. Fire would spread here like madness on gasoline. A grin crept across my dirt-smeared face. I reached into my soul arsenal and summoned a card. It materialized before me in a rain of light sparks, and the moment its rune flared up, fire sprang into existence in my hand. In the next second, I was holding a whip of swirling flame, burning hotter and brighter than I ever remembered it burning. Without any hesitation, I swung it wide in a blazing arc overhead. And the forest around me exploded. Ka-a-boom! Trees ignited in an instant. Scorching pillars of fire rose skyward as the blaze leapt from trunks to branches. Leaves turned to ash mid-air. Vines withered and ferns blackened. The fire spread faster than it should have. It was greedy and it was ravenous. And it was perfect. Behind us, the shrieking paused for a beat. Then returned louder and angrier. The beasts mindlessly tried to push through the flames. Some were incinerated instantly. Others didn't care. But one creature, plowed through the blaze like a mad bull. The gorilla spider. Its monstrous body barreled through the inferno, its black fur aflame and blistered skin crackling with heat. But it still didn't stop moving forward. And the rest of the creatures followed. Dozens, if not hundreds, of spider monkeys gave chase. They were screeching and burning, flooding in behind the gorilla spider like soldiers following their king to war. But by the time they tore through the wall of fire, Lily and I were nowhere to be seen. Because we were no longer above ground. Yes, this had been the plan all along. I'd use the fire as a distraction to erase our tracks and burn our scent. The moment the forest had gone up in flames, I used my innate power to carve a hollow cavern into the earth, then dropped us inside. It had taken less than 3 seconds. I left narrow ducts for air, small and hidden, snaking between layers of stone, then sealed the entrance behind us. And just like that, we vanished. The fire raged above. The monsters howled and clawed and searched. But they'd find nothing. We were safe. For now. I slumped to the ground, feeling the adrenaline draining from my veins and exhaustion come crashing back. Everything was suddenly so still and quiet. The heat from above trickled down in waves, turning the temperature warm but not smothering. I dropped Lily's body beside me. She was bruised and bleeding, her skin chafed and smudged with soot, her blood soaking into the dirt. I didn't move, I just breathed. In, out. The scent of ash began to seep through the vents. The world above had become completely engulfed in fire and smoke and silence. Then, Lily stirred weakly. A tiny sound escaped her lips, half a groan, half a cough. I turned to her and placed a hand over her chest. Her heartbeat was still strong. Yeah, she'd live. 235. Lily woke up in a daze. One of her eyes refused to open fully, and the skin around it felt tight and swollen. An agonizing groan slipped her lips. Her body felt crushed, like she was buried under several stacks of weighted blankets and couldn't breathe properly. A stabbing ache throbbed at the back of her head, as if her skull was being split open by 1,000 puncturing needles. She tried to sit up, then immediately winced. Her jaw felt heavy, so heavy that it might as well have been replaced with gravel. Her ribs protested every breath. Part of her tongue was numb, though she couldn't tell if it was from swelling or biting down too hard. It was all very painful. But pain meant she was alive. And Lily would gladly take being alive and battered over dead and at peace. After a few seconds, she tried again. This time, she braced herself, pressing one trembling hand into the ground and using the other to clutch her side, as if holding herself together might keep the pain from spreading. With a sharp grunt through gritted teeth, Lily pushed herself into a half-sitting position. The world tilted. Her vision swam out of focus like she was underwater, and her stomach rolled. She closed her eyes, breathing shallowly through her nose until the nausea passed. Then, slowly, she opened them again, or rather, it. Her left eye still wouldn't open fully. Everything on that side was a blur of red and darkness. Blinking against the haze, she took in her surroundings. She appeared to be leaning against the wall of a hollow chamber. The surface behind her was cool and uneven, packed dirt veined with roots, some of them twitching slightly, as if the earth itself was alive. From the dampness in the air and the rich scent of soil, she figured she was underground. Then she spotted someone else. Sitting across from her was a boy. He looked no older than 17. His hair was the color of spun gold, not just blonde, but radiant, as if each strand had been dipped in sunlight. His eyes were the same hue, so clear and bright that they almost seemed to be glowing in the dark. He wore black trousers, ragged and dust-covered. A loose gray robe was draped haphazardly over his shoulders. Beneath it, his chest was tightly wrapped in bandages. Above him floated a golden card. It hovered silently in the air, slowly spinning in place. Its surface shimmered with runes that cast a warm light over the chamber. That light made everything else look dull. Lily stared at it, then back at the boy. He was using his origin card like a lantern. She wanted to comment, but wisely chose not to. Instead, she muttered, "So you saved me. I knew you would." "Well, honestly, it was a bit of a gamble. I also thought you'd leave me there." He didn't reply. He wasn't even looking at her. His eyes were closed and legs crossed like he was deep in meditation. Meditating. Lily wanted to comment on that, too. But didn't, because she valued her life, and wasn't in the mood for another beatdown. "Come on, Sam," she croaked, shifting against the cold earth. "Are you still not satisfied? Even after punching my face into modern art?" "Don't call me that," he said at last, voice dry, eyes still closed. And maybe you shouldn't have egged me on like a damn moron while we were surrounded by unknown threats. Do you know how stupid that was? All your injuries are your own fault. Right, Lily smiled bitterly. They do say fight fire with fire. So I guess I fought stupidity with stupidity. Samael opened his eyes, then narrowed them, venom creeping into his tone. Are you calling me stupid? No, Lily replied quickly. But definitely unreasonable. That did it. He was on his feet in an instant. Unreasonable. You dare talk to me about reason? You, of all people. You have the audacity. I've said sorry, Sam. Lily snapped. I've apologized over and over. I know I messed up, okay. I know, but I can't take it back. I wish I could, but I can't. So what do you want me to do? What could I possibly do to make up for what I did? He didn't answer. I mean it, she pressed on, quieter now. Just say the word, Sam. Whatever show of apology you want, I'll do it. He waited for a beat, then pointed at her, as if issuing a final warning. Do not call me that. Lily paused, then looked down at her hand with a small, defeated smile. Right, I keep forgetting my sacred nickname privileges are revoked. My mistake. Don't pretend this is some petty argument over names, Lily, he growled. She stood, wobbled, but didn't sit back down. Then what is it? She demanded. You want me to beg more? Cry for forgiveness? Because I remember doing all of that already. You think this is about punishment? He scoffed, stepping closer. You think I want to hate you? No, you need to, she shot back. Because it's easier than admitting I'm not the only one at fault here. He looked away, waving a hand dismissively like he was done with her nonsense. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Her voice rose. You didn't even love me, Sam. She shouted, fists clenched, shoulders trembling. You flirted with every pretty girl who batted an eye, never made time, didn't even call me on my birthday. He answered with nothing, but above them, his origin card glowed brighter. You didn't care about anything I ever said. You talked down to me like you were always doing me a favor. You made me feel like I was just, convenient. Disposable, she hissed. Samael rolled his eyes. Fine, I wasn't the best boyfriend. You think I don't know that? Then why? She snarled. Why are you acting like I'm the only one who messed up? Like I broke something sacred between us. Because you broke my trust. He exclaimed. His voice, suddenly so loud, echoed like thunder through the hollow chamber. And his words landed like a blade. Lily parted her lips, stunned like she hadn't expected an actual answer. In the stillness that followed, Samael spoke again, softer and measured. You were my first friend, Lily. Not a court alliance. Not some political pawn for my family. You were the first person I chose to trust. The first person I ever opened up to. Yes, it was true that Samael never really loved Lily. Not the way poets wrote about love. Not the way songs were sung. Not the way Michael probably loved her in the game. With him, it wasn't some fairy tale devotion or soul-bound longing. There was no symphony in his chest when she smiled. No grand epiphany when she touched his hand. No, what he felt for Lily was something far simpler. And infinitely more dangerous. He just trusted her. And that was the real problem. He let his guard down. Just a little, just enough. He told her things he'd never told anyone, things he never planned to tell anyone. Like how much he hated his father but still wanted his acknowledgement. How he blamed himself for his mother's death, and how happy their family would have been if not for him. How sometimes, he felt like a monster pretending to be a person. How every time someone got too close, a voice in his head whispered, they'll leave. They always do. Because how could someone love him when there was nothing to love about him? And Lily had listened. She'd looked at him, really looked. Not at the power his name held. Not at his birth title. Not at the sarcasm and bravado he wore like armor to keep people away. But at the real him, beneath all the mess and violence. And for a moment, he thought she saw something worth keeping. He thought she was someone for whom he could try to be better. Because he didn't want to let that one person down who believed he wasn't a total disgrace. And he tried so much to be a better person. Maybe his efforts were too little and too late. But he did make them. So when she kissed Michael, when she chose Michael, it wasn't a betrayal of love. It was a betrayal of that trust. It was her showing him that the moment he let someone get close enough to see who he really was, they'd pick someone else. Someone easier. Someone good. It was the universe holding up a mirror and whispering, your father was right. You are an undeserving, unworthy, unlovable disgrace. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But feelings rarely do. Samael knew exactly how unfair it was to hold Lily's disloyalty over her when he himself had never been all that faithful to begin with. In fact, he had no doubt that if this story was told from someone else's point of view, he'd be the bad guy here. He knew this because when he played the game as Michael in his past life, he had seen Samael Kaiser Theosbane as nothing but a shallow third-rate villain character. A cliché case of an arrogant young master from an elite noble family hoarding a jade beauty he didn't deserve. So when the protagonist came to rescue that jade beauty from the young master's grasp, he cheered. He cheered when Samael got what he deserved. But that was the game. This was reality, and in reality, no one is the bad guy in their own story, right? Samael laughed scornfully under his breath. I told you things I never admitted out loud. Do you know what it feels like to tell someone your deepest insecurities, then watch them turn around and validate every one of them? It feels like a punch to the gut, Lily. Lily looked like she couldn't breathe. She flinched like he'd struck her. Sam, no, he interrupted firmly. Just don't. His tone wasn't loud, but it stopped her cold. Her lips trembled, tears welled up and then spilled over without resistance. I'm sorry, she whispered. Her voice shook. I didn't mean to, you know I didn't mean. Stop, she kept crying, shoulders trembling, breaths breaking apart, but he kept speaking, each word scraping its way out of him. I know our relationship was never real. It was political, it was forced, I understood that. His fists tightened, nails digging into palms. And for a second, he looked like he was trying to hold something together, something that had already come undone. A lump formed in his throat as he continued. I knew how much pressure you were under. Your father was chasing the Golden Duke's approval. He used you like a bargaining chip. I knew what it would have cost you to walk away. But, couldn't you have shown me even a fraction of the trust I gave you? He didn't look at her. But his voice kept coming, heavier now. If you liked someone else, couldn't you have just told me? Did you really think I was so small, so spiteful, that I wouldn't have helped you? That I wouldn't have found some way to make it easier? He grimaced. I would have done something, Lily. Anything. She took steps toward him, then collapsed in on herself. Sobbing openly now, curled up before him. You were my first friend, he said, voice breaking as he swallowed. And sure, I didn't love you. Not romantically. That's true, but I did like you. And you broke my heart. Lily cried harder, her face buried in her hands. She didn't try to explain. There was nothing much left to say. Samael said nothing more either. His throat ached, his fists hurt, but he just stood there, silent and unmoving, as if staying still long enough might help him deal with the feelings he had just poured out. When the hush finally broke, it wasn't clean. It cracked and splintered with every shaky breath she took. Then, slowly, she pushed herself upright. Her face was red and tear-streaked. Her breath came in short bursts. Her eyes were swollen, more than they already were before. I'm sorry, she whispered again, voice raspy from crying. I'm sorry, Sam. I didn't know. I didn't even realize it meant so much to you. I can't forgive you, he said, cutting her short. Because that was true. He couldn't pretend things were normal. Couldn't pretend she hadn't stomped on his vulnerability. Lily froze. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but no words spilled out. She looked at him, then away, and then, weakly nodded. Okay, I understand, she said softly, took a trembling breath, followed by a long pause, before looking up again. But, can I offer a deal? He turned, just enough to see her from the corner of his eye. If you can just try, Sam, just try to forgive me, she proposed, then I promise I'll spend as long as it takes to earn it. And if you ever trust me again, I swear on the heavens above, I'll never betray it. The silence that came after wasn't heavy, wasn't sharp, wasn't empty either, it was just, long. Samael didn't answer right away. He was still deciding whether she meant it, or whether he wanted to believe she did. But in the end, it didn't matter. He had already made up his mind, he wasn't going to trust her again. Or anyone, for that matter. Still, sooner or later, he was going to have to deal with Lily. It was inevitable, she was the main heroine, after all. Whether he liked it or not, her powers would be crucial in dismantling the syndicate. And even after that, during the total war. Hell, he could even use her to stop the assassination on the royal twins. She was far too valuable an asset to throw away just because of his feelings. So he kept staring at the wall. Not looking at her. not really looking at anything. Finally, after a while, he gave a single shrug. Whatever. Louis let out a breath, long, trembling, almost another sob, and slid down to sit against the wall beside him. She wiped her face with her sleeve. And for a very long time, neither of them said another word. Chapter 236. Vlogging in the Hell Dimension, because why not? Ray Warner had seen and done some wild things in his life. He'd once fought multiple infant spirit beasts during a portal break in his hometown while dressed as a burger joint mascot for an online promo collab. He'd challenged a couple of mafia members to a fucking dance battle mid-hostage situation and somehow won. They died of secondhand embarrassment. Probably. He'd even live-streamed himself surviving in the dangerous wilderness with nothing but a spoon, 3 marshmallows, and a reckless amount of charisma. But this situation he now found himself in. Yeah, this was new. He was in the spirit realm. And he'd been stuck here for 4 days now, wandering alone. At first, he thought he was going insane. Because he'd started talking to himself. He was narrating his every move like some protagonist of a low-budget mockumentary show. But eventually, Ray came to a far more disturbing realization. He wasn't losing his mind. He was, always like this. Which, frankly, was worse. Ray shook his head, looked up, and sighed. He might not have been insane, but this world sure as hell was. The sky above was cracked. Literally, it was shattered like a mirror struck by a hammer, with broken shards just suspended there mid-collapse. And behind those fractures loomed a full moon, glowing in a haunting shade of rust red. It hung low, too low, bleeding slow rivers of crimson light that spilled somewhere far beyond the horizon. Around him was a dense forest crawling with massive insectoid creatures, some so large they could swallow his head whole in a single bite. Their chittering antennae twitched non-stop. Some had translucent shells that shimmered faintly in the dark. Others scuttled sideways in sudden jerky bursts, like they were glitching in and out of reality. One of them had human-like teeth. Too many of them, and it smiled when Ray looked at it. Another had a face. Not a bug's face. A man's face. Like some bored god had peeled it off a person and stretched it over a huge cockroach's skull. Because clearly, this place wasn't unsettling enough already. The trees were just as wrong, tall, with slick black bark, and luminous bluish-green moss pulsing in the cracks like veins under dead skin. The vegetation was alien and misproportioned and abnormal, all oversized undergrowth and monstrous ferns that reached far too high. This forest didn't just feel dangerous. It felt forbidden, like no human was ever meant to walk here. And Ray stood in the middle of it all, camera in one hand, and a short sword in the other, and kept talking like it was just another Tuesday. Alright, my lovely Radiants. Quick update from your favorite creator. It's day 4 of being stuck in this death dimension. I've spotted 4 cursed owls, 1 levitating deer with way too many knees, and I'm about 90% sure this tree is screaming at me. He turned the camera. The tree to his left was, in fact, screaming at him. It did not have a mouth. Right, cool, that's a thing I know now. He panned the camera back to himself. His wavy hair, light brown like his eyes, was messy. One sleeve of his uniform jacket was half burnt, and his grin was too bright for a guy in a murder forest. But hey, on the bright side, I've filmed so much content, I can make a whole vlog series out of this. So when I escape this place and upload everything, you all are getting so many binge-worthy videos. Don't forget to like and subscribe and show a little support to your boy. Thwoom, something suddenly exploded in the distance. Followed by a low boom. Ray flinched. Just a little. Correction, if I escape this place and upload everything. Thwoom, another rumble rolled across the forest. Ray frowned and stared into the camera. Alright, chat, something's definitely off. Type, yes, in the comments if you want me to go check it out. He waited in silence for a few seconds. Then beamed like an idiot. Oh right, this isn't a livestream, so whether you type yes or not, I'm gonna go check it out anyway. Because why wouldn't he? He was stuck in a nightmare jungle. Might as well get some spicy content. That was just basic survival logic. Obviously. Ray followed the sound as quietly as possible, moving through moss-covered roots and the ankle-deep gloop of wet soil and decaying plants. His thoughts were filled with how many manicure sessions he'd have to book once he got back, when somewhere ahead, something hissed. Then groaned. Then started screaming curses in human language. Ray blinked. Wait, chat, I think I found another person. Either that, or this is a trap and I'm about to die in the stupidest way possible. He crept forward, ducking beneath a twisted arch of writhing vines, and stepped into a small clearing. There it was, the source of all that commotion. A young man. He looked to be about the same age as Ray, and wore the same standard combat uniform issued by the Apex Academy, though his was a bit dirtier, a lot more torn. He was tall, blue-haired, and slightly disheveled. And bathed in the eerie light of the blood moon, he was currently locked in a losing wrestling match with a car-sized creature that had a long, segmented body of a millipede, and slimy tentacles sprouting from various parts of it like some malformed octopus. The blue-haired boy was half wrapped in those tentacles, yelling some very imaginative curses. He looked like an annoyed cat caught in a slimy slinky, and not in a cute way. Ray tilted his head and slowly zoomed the camera in on the obscene scene unfolding before him. I feel like I shouldn't be seeing this. The guy spotted him. His frantic eyes lit up with hope. Hey, you're a fellow cadet, right? Come help me. Ray squinted at him, hard. He narrowed his eyes like a cartoon detective trying to solve something deeply complex. Slowly, suspiciously, he took a step forward, then raised an eyebrow and stroked his chin. Sure, I could help you. But how do I know you're actually human? He asked, genuine concern in his voice, though it sounded more like a puppy trying to solve quantum physics. I mean, what if you only look human, and the second I get close, you devour me? The blue-haired guy stared at him, stunned. What? I am human. I'm being violated by a fanged worm with slimy tentacles. The slime is acidic, by the way. It's burning my skin. Do something. Kill the monster. Ray took another thoughtful pause. Quote. But have you considered that maybe, you're the monster? What a philosophical dilemma would that be, huh? The guy lost his entire mind. Oh my fucking god. Just help me, you absolute buffoon. Ray blinked. Okay, you are human. Only humans swear at each other like that. Actually, it's kind of comforting. He adjusted the angle of his camera, zooming in even more. But, wow, look at that lighting. The way the moon's red glow hits those slimy tentacles, that's cinema, baby. You're filming this? The blue-haired guy screeched. Ray tilted his head. Yes, you're welcome. The boy, now directing his curses more at Ray than the monster, thrashed and kicked and screamed. Ray let out a troubled sigh. Fine, I'll help. But you'll have to get to me, alright? If I unleash my power right now, you might become collateral damage. Then throw me the damn sword. The guy roared. Another sigh left Ray's lips, long and dramatic, like he was being asked to sacrifice a cherished child. He looked at the short sword in his hand, kissed it gently, and muttered, if you insist. But be careful, this was a gift from one of my subscribers. They said it was made from cursed steel and forged in the dying breath of a dragon, or maybe they just bought it online. Still, it's expensive. He tossed the sword with surprising accuracy. The blue-haired cadet caught it mid-struggle and immediately began hacking away at the tentacles like his life depended on it, which, to be fair, it did. After a few tense moments and one almost catastrophic face slice, he tore himself free and bolted toward Ray like a man on fire, yelling, do something. Do something. Do something. Ray grinned. He gently let go of his camera, and it hovered in the air beside him like a drone. The millipede thing reared back and let out an ear-splitting screech. Then it lunged. The blue-haired guy dove behind Ray like a child hiding behind their older sibling during a horror movie. Ray looked straight into the camera, adjusted his posture slightly, and flashed his best influencer smile. All right, guys, he said brightly. This is our first boss battle. Send me some gifts if I win, yeah. The millipede charged, its many legs pounding against the earth like stampeding hooves. Ray didn't move. He simply raised his palm toward the incoming creature. And his hand began to glow, softly at first, then with an intensifying brilliance, until it looked like a tiny star trying to claw its way out of his skin. The air grew hotter. Everything fell silent. Even the monster hesitated. Then, kaboom! The entire clearing was swallowed in a blinding explosion. A thunderous shockwave tore through the air, turning night into violent, furious day. Flames erupted outward in a sweeping arc. The moss ignited. The grass, the soil, the monster, everything in front of Ray lit up in a raging firestorm that left the world howling with heat. The millipede octopus thing didn't even get the chance to scream before it was reduced to nothing. Ashes blew past them like burnt snowflakes. The camera slowly panned to Ray, who caught it midair and grinned. Your boy is simply too strong, guys. Chapter 237. This is fine, everything is on fire. The blue-haired boy stood frozen behind Ray, face illuminated by the lingering flames, eyes wide and unblinking. He stared at the blackened field where the tentacled millipede had been moments ago, then slowly turned to Ray with silent awe. What was that? And how did you? Ray flipped his hair back with exaggerated flair, looking far too pleased with himself. Name's Ray Warner. You may continue basking in my greatness. As for how I did that, you see, the air here is supercharged with oxygen. This phenomenon makes my explosions way more dramatic. Great for content. The boy blinked. He looked like he was about to say something, maybe properly introduce himself. But Ray raised a hand to cut him short. No need to tell me your name, he said smoothly, winking at the camera. I'm gonna forget it anyway. Just call me boss, and I'll call you my lackey. The blue-haired young man scowled and opened his mouth in response, clearly ready to protest. When suddenly the trees around them began to shake. Not rustle, shake, like something big. No, a lot of big somethings were stampeding toward them. Ray's brow creased. What's happening? The cadet next to him rolled his eyes with the weary resignation of a babysitter who was done with his job. Your dramatic explosion just rang the dinner bell. As if right on cue, dozens of tens, of those same tentacled millipede abominations burst from the tree line ahead. The earth rumbled, bark splintered, branches snapped like brittle bones. Roots tore out of the ground as those creatures surged forward like a living, screeching flood of flesh-eating insects. Ray nearly swallowed his tongue. Oh, hell no. He let go of the camera again and whipped his hand upward. Kaboom! Almost immediately, a second explosion detonated from his palm, this one even louder and hotter than the one before. A torrent of fire rolled through the clearing like a tidal wave of destruction. The front line of monsters didn't even have time to react. They were incinerated mid-charge, their bodies reduced to charred husks that collapsed into heaps of sizzling cinders. The blast echoed for miles. But then the smoke began to clear. The ash drifted, and more came, even more, from the trees, from under the ground, from everywhere. Those harrowing millipede horrors kept coming in a flood, their tentacles flailing and eyes glinting. Their screeching drowned out any other noise in the forest. The only sound that remained was a chorus of chittering teeth and death and slime. The whole clearing trembled under their combined weight, the rapid skittering of their countless legs sounding like a rainfall made of knives. Ray's breath hitched. This is bad. This is really, really bad. The boy beside him tilted his head slightly, frowning. Why? Just keep blasting them. Their numbers are already thinning. 4 or 5 more of those explosions and you'll wipe out the horde. Ray shook his head like a man who knew he was screwed. I can't. My power allows me to fire only 3 explosions before there's a cooldown of at least a few seconds. Oh, the boy groaned as he realized the severity of the situation now. Running was not an option. These millipedes were much faster than them. If they tried to run anyway, the horde would easily catch up to them and rip their flesh to shreds in mere seconds, seconds that would take for Ray to reuse his power. Fighting was also not an option. Because against that many beasts, they wouldn't last a heartbeat. Ray should have known all that, but he still weakly pointed toward the woods. So we run, right? I vote we run. I strongly vote we. No, the cadet spoke, and placed a hand on Ray's shoulder. Ray flinched. What are you doing? Don't touch me. Why are you touching me? The young man's gray eyes were calm, too calm for how grim the situation was, as he responded, I'll give you a 30% boost in your power. In return, you must vow not to use your origin card for the next 3 hours. Ray gawked. What? Are you? The vow, the boy said, louder this time. Do you accept? If you do, give me your verbal confirmation and blast those things to smithereens. Ray glanced up. The monsters were already on them, barely meters away. Death wasn't coming. It was already here. Fine, Ray screamed. I agree. The instant the words left his mouth, he raised his hand and fired the third explosion. KWA boom. The third explosion wasn't an explosion at all. It was a catastrophe. It was like several truckloads of TNT going off at once. The sheer force of the blast split the earth. A blazing shockwave tore through the clearing, turning everything in its radius to rubble, soot, and smoldering ash. Trees didn't burn, they ceased to exist. The ground didn't crack, it cratered like it had just been struck by a meteor. The air itself turned molten. The first few rows of the millipede horde evaporated, reduced to scorching dust in the blink of an eye. The next few rows were thrown backwards, limbs torn off midair, their twisted carcasses slamming into trees that exploded on contact. The clearing was increased in size by several meters as the explosion pulverized and leveled anything. standing in its way. Ray's clothes flapped violently in the backdraft, his hair shooting upward like it was trying to flee his skull. In the end, he couldn't control the recoil and was flung back. The blue-haired boy stepped slightly to the side as Ray crashed behind him with a solid, undignified thump. Arg, Ray groaned, curled on his side. Smoke still rose from his palm. His ears rang. His vision jittered. He blinked at the utter devastation in front of him with something between terror and admiration. Then he looked up. The cadet he'd rescued just a few minutes ago now stood tall over him, back to the firelight, blue hair gently swaying in the wind that carried embers like fireflies. Ray's lips, dry and cracked, trembled a little as he spoke. "WH. What did you say your name was again?" The boy grinned. "Vince." Vince cleverly. He held out a hand. "Now let's get moving, boss. That little fireworks show of yours probably drew in even more beasts. I spotted some spider monkey things to the east of here last night. I'm not looking to become their lunch today." Ray stared at the offered hand for a long second. Then awkwardly took it. "Yeah, fair." Vince pulled him up, then pointed at the short sword in his hand with his chin. "Also, I'm keeping this. Consider it a small payment for saving your sorry ass." Ray opened his mouth in wordless protest. He wanted to argue that he did the saving first, but at the moment, he had neither the strength nor the breath to mount a good case. Maybe this was what it felt like to get scammed. Chapter 238, Main Characters. Assemble. Walking out of the underground cavern, I paused and looked around. It had been a full day since those spider monkeys attacked us. After spending countless hours buried beneath the earth, waiting for the fire to die and the beasts to scatter, we had finally decided to exit the hollow chamber. And the first thing I noticed upon coming outside was that all traces of the forest fire I started yesterday were gone. The scorched plants and charred vegetation had already been overtaken by fresh undergrowth, lush vines, curling ferns, and sprouting moss blanketing the forest floor. Even the towering black trees had recovered from the burn damage, their bark now unmarred and leaves rustling softly in the breeze. The jungle looked exactly as it had before I set it ablaze. And just like before, the whole place was swarming with overgrown insects, many of them so creepy they sent shivers down my spine. "Julie is not going to like this place," I muttered. I wondered where she was. In the game, Michael and Ray found her on the 7th day. After that, the trio went on to locate Lily and Alexia. Then, finally, all of them stumbled into Vince on the 10th day. But since Lily was here with me now, the entire lineup had changed. I was sure some twisted butterfly effect had probably already taken place and knocked the plotline off course. My mere existence had already disrupted this event far too much. Which meant Juliana could be anywhere by now. And I didn't like the thought of her being in this hellish jungle alone. "Julie," Lily's voice echoed from behind, still somewhere near the mouth of the cavern. "You mean Juliana Blade, your shadow?" I nodded without turning to her, eyes still scanning the tree line for any sign of danger. "You worried about her?" she asked. Her tone was laced with a teasing undercurrent, which was another thing I didn't like. "Worried? Why would I be worried about my servant? If anything, she should be the one worrying about me," I scoffed. Then touched my chin thoughtfully. "Although, this place is teeming with bugs. And she's always been ridiculously grossed out by them," Lily snorted. "Well, who isn't? Fair point." I sighed and kept watch. The Noctvale Wilds, true to its name, was a region of the spirit realm forever shrouded in night. The sun never rose in this cursed forest. Thankfully, the bleeding moon hanging in the fractured sky was bright enough to illuminate everything with its rust-red glow. But honestly, what unsettled me wasn't the haunting scenery, or the enormous insects, or the ancient trees that could scream even though they had no mouth. No, instead, I was worried about that dream I had before waking up in this place. For some reason, my mind kept circling back to it. Every moment since I opened my eyes in this hellhole had been so chaotic and draining that I hadn't had a moment to stop and think. But now that things had calmed down a bit, my head had been constantly replaying that surreal dream I saw. The image of this very cracked sky I was standing under right now, this same bleeding moon spilling crimson light like blood over a still, silver lake. Then, from that lake, several hands, pale as snow and big enough to dwarf mountains, erupted and reached skyward. It felt as if those hands were desperate to grab the moon. And then, the scene shifted. And I had that conversation with him. The primordial prince of desires. Asmodeus. Gods, just remembering that encounter was enough to make the hair on my body stand on end. I still couldn't believe it. I had really come face to face with the seventh demon prince. I had really talked to him. But what I couldn't wrap my head around, even more than the fact it happened at all, was, how? Just how did Asmodeus invade my dream? I'd been so damn careful. I'd never once come into direct contact with his summoning card. He shouldn't have had any hold over me. He shouldn't have had the power to influence me in any way. So then how did I end up seeing him in my dream? No, wait, if I'm remembering correctly, he said I'm the one who wandered into his dream. Okay, maybe not in those exact words. But he definitely implied it. I think his precise words were, "You're not an ordinary young man. Even here, you can keep your eyes open. Most mortals who wander into my dreams come screaming. Or kneeling. You're doing neither." Now, I'll admit that being called extraordinary by an eldritch entity was kind of flattering. Flattering in a, my life just flashed before my eyes kind of way. Because, sure, I have been called charming before. But never by a mythical being whose gaze felt like it could peel the flesh from your bones like skin off an orange. But what actually troubled me was the fact that it was me somehow who entered his dream. How? Why? This was far more confusing, and way more horrifying, than if it had been the other way around. I rubbed my temples, trying to chase off the rising dread. Arg, I hate dealing with the unknown. Behind me, Lily called out. Did you say something? I waved her off without looking. Talking to myself. Should I be concerned? Only if I start speaking in a distorted voice. Noted. I sighed again, then frowned. Wait a second, I'd been standing here monologuing to myself for, what? A few minutes now. Why hadn't Lily come out of the cavern yet? What was she even doing? Hey, what the fuck is taking so long? My frown turned into a full scowl as I spun around, only to see her crouched a few steps away. She was kneeling over a thick black branch with a short dagger in hand. From the looks of it, she was carefully wrapping bandages around one end of the wooden stick to secure the blade in place there. I blinked, then scowled harder. What the hell are you doing? Lily looked up as if I had just asked something obvious like why people breathe. Making a spear. I blinked again. I had so many questions, starting with, why? She tilted her head, as if that should have been obvious too. Because you broke my staff. And now I don't have any good weapons. I kept looking at her for a few seconds, trying very hard not to smack her. Finally, I opened my mouth and spoke slowly, like I was explaining something difficult to a particularly dumb child. I mean, why are you doing it by hand when you could have just asked me? I summoned my origin card and tapped my foot. The ground near her rippled. A chunk of earth rose, shaped itself into a gnarled hand, and snatched the dagger from her grasp. The earthen hand then twisted, stretched, and hardened into a long, smooth shaft of stone. Its fingers clenched tight, fusing perfectly with the metallic hilt of the dagger. And just like that, a cleanly forged spear dropped in front of her. Lily stared at it in silence. See that? I yelled, exaggeratedly throwing my arms wide. Took me 2 seconds. No bandages wasted, no arts and crafts hour in the middle of monster territory. She didn't reply, just picked up the spear, gave it a light test swing. And muttered, mostly to herself. I was having a moment. Chapter 239, Main Characters. Assemble 2. After preparing ourselves, we began to move. Well, to be honest, there wasn't much to prepare. Since we were randomly dropped into this region thanks to Celine's misteleportation, we didn't exactly have our full hunter gear or equipment or backpacks. We only had whatever we happened to be wearing at the time of being whisked away from the night sanctuary. Lily had her ragged uniform, a vest, a jacket, combat trousers, and a pair of military boots. And I had all that, plus my robe. Luckily, my ordinary-looking gray robe had a dimensional storage pocket. It was currently stuffed with energy drinks, water bottles, snacks, and some spare clothes. So I'd changed into a black satin shirt with the sleeves all rolled up, and a matching pair of jeans. Now was my outfit suitable for fighting? Probably not, but did I look good while surrounded by nightmarish creatures that seemed as if they'd crawled straight out of hell? Hell yes. It was just like my father had always taught me, one should look presentable even when running for their life. So even if you die, you're already dressed well enough for an open casket. Okay, fine, my father didn't teach me that. Or anything, but let's not unpack my daddy issues right now. So we're moving west? Lily asked, walking beside me. She was slashing at the oversized grass, bushes, and vines with her new spear to clear the way. We tried not to make too much noise, but moving quietly through a forest this dense was like trying to sneak through a fireworks factory with a marching band. It wasn't an easy task. That said, credit where credit's due. As much as I like to rag on Lily for being one of the more useless main characters, okay, maybe I'm a bit biased, her soul arsenal was actually really useful. She'd built her deck in a way that made it highly unlikely for any threat to creep up on her unnoticed. Catching her off guard was nearly impossible. She always had a card activated that would quickly alarm her of any life-threatening danger coming at us way ahead of time. And once she was alarmed, she'd deploy her origin card and use her foresight to see exactly what threat was approaching. Then she'd either change route and move around that threat or prepare a proper counter to deal with it. But if all that somehow still wasn't enough, she also had a bunch of trap cards she could plant around wherever we stopped to rest. These cards could trigger instantly if someone tried to sneak up on us, not only alerting us but also ensnaring or even outright neutralizing the intruder. Basically, her danger detection and threat perception were off the charts. Thanks to her, we'd already avoided several deadly ambushes. Traveling with her had really made navigating this hell forest a bit easy. Only a bit, though. Yes, we're moving west, I answered. And you're completely sure there are others stranded here like us? She asked, something she had already asked quite a few times. I rolled my eyes. Lily, asking the same question over and over again won't change the answer. Yes, there are others here. I know it. I'm only asking because you're not telling me how you know. Why are you so sure? She pressed. Is it just a hunch? I threw my hands up in exasperation. Oh, my God, no, it is not a hunch. I know it for a fact. She looked like she wanted to keep grilling me, but wisely decided not to. Instead, she let out a soulful sigh. If it's true, I wonder if Michael's here. Oh, he was. And if he's doing all right. Oh, he wasn't. Somewhere not too far away. Michael Godswill stood completely still. Because he was neck-deep in a swamp pool full of eyeballs. Eyeballs. Literal eyeballs. They blinked in sync. They squelched when they shifted. Michael whispered to himself, okay. Stay calm. Don't panic, Michael, and don't you dare scream. One of the eyeballs brushed against his chin. He screamed, Arga. Immediately, a gigantic six-legged bird shrieked from the towering trees above, its body rotten and decayed, its wings nothing but bone. It was a corpse bird. A minor spirit beast, and definitely not something Michael wanted to draw the attention of. Why? Because it had killed 2 cadets just a couple of minutes ago. Michael had arrived too late to save them, but right on time to witness the slaughter. And yeah, he did not want to fight it. Unfortunately, it had now seen him. The rotting bird let out a bone-rattling screech and dive-bombed toward him from above. Michael whimpered and cursed his fate. Quote. Okay, now it's time to panic. Yup. I was absolutely sure he was not doing well. Because aside from the fact that he couldn't even use his origin card when alone, since he needed someone else to copy powers from, he was also the protagonist. And all protagonists must always suffer. Suffering builds character, after all. Hey, thank the gods I wasn't the protagonist. We kept walking for a good part of an hour. We did run into a few harrowingly large arthropods along the way, but nothing I couldn't handle. My innate power was enough to take down most beasts that crossed our path. For now, but I knew the deeper we went into the Noctvale wilds, and the lower we descended from one plateau to the next, the more the threats would begin to spike. The more dangerous and powerful the beasts would become, and the more hostile the environment would turn. We were still a long, long way from the Golden Sanctuary. And the worst was yet to come. I knew all that. I knew, and I couldn't help but feel I was underprepared for this journey. I didn't have any rare grade offensive cards in my arsenal. Hell, I didn't even have my sword. Oriath was still somewhere on the other side of the Crown of Thorns. I had called it, and I could sense it coming, flying to me as fast as it could. But it would take days, maybe even weeks, for Oriath to scale the Crown of Thorns, then travel across this endless jungle before finally reaching me. Weeks before I'd finally be at my best. But what if something unexpected happens in this time? What if one of the main characters dies and I lose a valuable pawn crucial to my future plans? What if I myself ends up in a life or death situation and don't have the strength to get out of it? All these worst-case scenarios started piling up in my head. I clenched my fists, then let out a long sigh and forced myself to clear my thoughts. Right, I told myself. Thinking about it won't change anything. It is what it is. If something happens, I'll deal with it then. Chapter 240, Main Characters. Assemble 3. Come to think of it, we'd been walking in silence for a while now. It wasn't particularly awkward, but it wasn't very comforting either. Honestly, at this point, I really was starting to miss Julie. I hoped we found someone soon. Anyone, even Alexia would do. I sighed for the nth time and glanced sideways at Lily. Her lip was still split, her eye swollen shut. I doubted she could even see clearly from it. Her forehead was wrapped in gauze, and her nose looked crooked. Okay, real talk. Did I feel bad for punching 7 distinct shades of hell out of her face? Not really, no, but did I not feel even a twinge of guilt? Fine, maybe a little. She did, after all, rescue me and carry my unconscious body for 3 days. That must have been hard. Sure, it wasn't enough to earn her a place back in my good graces. Especially since she was the one who provoked me into fighting her to begin with. But still, I probably could have held back a little more. I sighed again. Then, after another quiet stretch, I scratched the back of my neck and finally asked the one question I had been wanting to ask her since forever. Why Michael, though? Lily turned to me, frowning faintly at the sudden question. What about him? I mean, I shrugged, you said you're sorry and all that. But, why him? Why'd you pick Michael? Sure, he's a fine-looking man now, but before his awakening. The guy was the most disgustingly ugly human being I ever laid my eyes on. She blinked, then scoffed. Do you seriously think I'd be with someone just for their looks? How shallow do you think I am, Sam? Very, I replied without missing a beat. But fair enough. I guess if looks mattered to you at all, you'd have never left me. Wow, Lily half chuckled, shaking her head. I almost forgot how narcissistic you are. It's not narcissism if it's true, I pointed out. Go ahead, name 5 better-looking cadets than me in our entire batch. I'll wait. She opened her mouth and looked like she actually was about to try, then stopped as if realizing it was futile and scoffed again. Ha, see, I grinned. Exactly. Anyway, she said, changing the topic. You must know about Saint Marcus, right? Quote. Ah, sure, I said, rolling my shoulders. He was this legendary awakened figure who had the power to make any 2 people fall in love that would never fade. Lily nodded. Yes, most people only remember the power. But what they forget is that Marcus died alone. Yes, I know. Ironic, I chortled. One guy who could pair anyone together never found love himself. Maybe he liked being single. That's what the stories say. But there's a part all those fairy tales and legends leave out, Lily replied. Marcus did fall in love. Once. But the person he loved died young. Way before their time. I blinked, no idea where this conversation was headed. Oh, okay, damn, yeah, she said. But of course, with his power, he could have moved on. He could have been with anyone, man or woman. He could have made it work with someone new. So why didn't he? I asked. He just gave up. She smiled faintly. Because Marcus believed in destined love. Soulmates, if you will. I know, how cheesy it sounds, but he said true love only happens once in a lifetime. And if you lose it, nothing ever compares again. Everything else just feels like trying to relive a dream you barely remember. A feeling you keep on chasing forever but never quite grasp again. He said even with his powers, he couldn't replicate that feeling of faded love. I frowned. That sounds like nonsense to me. I don't believe in soulmates. People change and grow. What if the one you were with could have been your soulmate? Just the right person at the wrong time, you know what I mean. Like, I remember hooking up with this woman and thinking she was perfect. Unfortunately, she had kids older than me, so she rejected me. Still heartbroken about that, by the way. Lily turned toward me, smiling softly now. No, Sam, that's not how it works. It's not something that grows over time. It's something that happens instantaneously. Something you know deep in your soul. It doesn't wait. It hits you, like a bolt of lightning. Like your heart is being pulled into orbit around theirs. You feel it all at once, the gravity, the inevitability, the loss that hasn't even happened yet. You feel it filling you and draining you all at once. She paused, voice quieter now. It's not logical. It's not earned. You just know. You know it like you know your destiny. Like fate itself walking up and tapping you on the shoulder. I stared at her. She continued, have you ever met someone who made you feel like that? I opened my mouth and waited for a moment. I tried to think. I really did. But no one like that came to mind. Before I could answer, she did. If you have to think about it, then you haven't felt it. I went quiet. The silence stretched for a while. Then I asked, almost reluctantly, and you really believe finding this feeling is possible? I mean, given the population, what are the odds? Billions to one. Yes, of course. It is possible to find it, she replied, smiling wider with a kind of quiet certainty now that made me weirdly uncomfortable. Everyone does eventually. You just don't know when or where. It is fate, but you can lose it just as fast. I stayed silent. Lily exhaled. Look, I'm not saying what I did wasn't wrong. I understand how stupid I was. But that aside, the moment I met Michael, I just knew. I didn't realize it back then, but I knew he was the one. It was destiny. For the next few more minutes, we kept walking in a hush filled with the chirping of insects and the rustling of leaves. Then, I snorted. Lily glanced at me warily. What? No, nothing, I said, waving it off. Just wondering if you rehearsed that whole St. Marcus monologue in front of a mirror. I did not. What? She started, scandalized. Don't get me wrong, it was a great speech. I even got goosebumps. But there's no way you said it all with a straight face. You definitely practiced it. I giggled. Especially the part where you claimed to feel something in your soul. That was seriously so cringy. Oh my gods, Sam, she groaned, glaring at me. You're impossible. You said it, not me. I smirked. Also, for someone who believes so hard in fate and soulmates, you sure do specialize in giving people trust issues by cheating on them. Oh, heavens above, Lily huffed. I already told you I messed up. Don't make me regret opening up to you. You already should, I laughed. The banter continued after that for a while. I don't even remember much of it. But that's not important. What is important, is what I'll tell you now. It's something I wouldn't have ever admitted back then. Not to anyone, not even to myself. The thing is, Lily was right. And I knew it deep in my heart. She and Michael really were soulmates in the original story. In some of the plotlines, the ones where Michael sacrificed himself to seal the Spirit King in the void, he was completely forgotten by everyone. He was practically erased from existence itself. No one remembered him, not even Lily. But even then, even when she had no idea who he was, she cried for him. She'd wake up in the middle of the night with tears running down her face, clutching at her chest like something had been ripped out of it. She'd stare up at the sky sometimes and whisper to herself, wondering why it felt like she was missing someone. She couldn't explain it, but the pain was still there. And I hated that ending to the story. Not because it was bad writing. No, it was excellent writing. It was beautiful and tragic and moving. But it pissed me off. Because even after being erased from the world, he still had her heart. Even the gods couldn't take that kind of love away. And I guess, deep down, I knew it in my past life, like I knew it back then. I knew that I would never be that special for anyone. I would never be loved by anyone so much that even memory can't erase me from their heart. That love that feels like a bolt of lightning. That soul-shaking, world-breaking feeling. I doubted I would ever experience them. Because Lily was wrong about one thing, not everyone finds it. And yeah, knowing that stung a lot, but like I said, I would never have admitted that out loud. So instead, I kept grinning and joking like I always did. I put on that same old indifferent persona and kept roasting Lily for her cheesiness while she groaned and rolled her eyes. Until, all of a sudden, Totem, a bone-rattling sound rumbled through the woods.